Okay, here we have a video from Leighton Flowers asserting all kinds of falsehoods, errors, and lies. For example, his title is Human Autonomy, a defense of divine holiness. And that's what he's going to assert, that to assert human autonomy is simply to defend divine holiness. Human beings, since their creation, have never been autonomous. They have never been autonomous. They have never possessed the attribute of autonomy. Autonomy has a very specific meaning. It actually comes from it's a conjunction of two Greek terms, auta or auto meaning self, and nomos or nomos meaning law. So to be autonomous means to be a law unto oneself. Now, Leighton Flowers, I have to chalk this up to his abject ignorance, because he's going to go to Merriam-Webster's dictionary to try to find a definition of autonomy. He's even going to go to a thesaurus and say thesaurus is going to help us with definitions of terms. No, that's not what a thesaurus is for. A thesaurus is for giving you synonyms and antonyms of words, and they're primarily used for literary tools. If you're writing a paper or something, if you've used a word several times, you want to use a different word to say the same thing. But this thesaurus does not give you definitions of terms, and sadly, many dictionaries really fall short in giving proper definitions of terms as well. Autonomy means self-law, to be a law unto oneself. From their creation, as I have said, human beings have never been a law unto themselves. If we're going to use a Greek-derived conjunctive term like autonomy, the better term would be huponomy, under law. That's what human beings have always been. As human creatures, all of God's creatures have always been huponymous, under law, not autonomous, a law unto themselves. But let's hear what Leighton Flowers has to say, and he's going to reference Jason Mullett's Logical Belief Ministries video, and well, let's just hear what he has to say, because he's going to make some claims that we need to examine here.
Blame the differences, and again, I really think there's a lot of misunderstanding and talking past each other that I'll try to unpack a little bit of. I want to focus just briefly on the word autonomous. That's why I've named this program this way, about autonomy, because Jason mentions it in his discourse here, and he kind of acts as if it's that somebody would call our will autonomous, or that we have an autonomous will. Or a free will or libertarian freedom. Some people don't use the term autonomous for whatever reason, maybe because of the way it's been, demeaned, or the word even libertarian freedom. Some people avoid that word. And again, it all comes back to labels, how you define things. What does it mean to be autonomous? Well,
yes, it does come to definitions of terms, and apparently Leighton Flowers thinks his definition of human libertarian free will as the power of contrary choice, or the equal ability to choose between two or more incompatible options under the same circumstance. However you want to define free will, I typically just go with the power of contrary choice. That's a simple synergistic definition of human libertarian free will. It's a fallacious definition. It's not derived from the Bible. It is actually pulled from the philosophically speculative ether of error and falsehood. The Bible does not define human libertarian free will as the synergist Arminians, semi-Pelagians, or full-blown Pelagians want to define free will. The Bible actually defines human libertarian free will as one, a will that never assents to any errant propositions as if they were true, and two, a will that never wills to do anything other than that which is good and well-pleasing to God. Take that from John chapter 8, verses 31 through 38. Jesus himself gives us a two-part definition of human libertarian free will. The problem here, though, with Leighton Flowers is that he actually makes synonymous free will, his definition of human free will, and autonomy. They are not the same thing. Even Leighton Flowers' fallacious definition of human libertarian free will as the power of contrary choice is not the same as his definition of autonomy, okay, or the real definition of autonomy, being a law unto oneself. Okay, so he's making these terms synonymous. That's the problem there. Second of all, now he's going to go to the dictionary, Merriam-Webster's online dictionary. He did this in the free will debate with the definition of choice. You don't need a philosophy degree. We just have to go to Webster's Dictionary. Apparently, that's the authority now, is Webster's Dictionary. Well, I'm sorry that the people at Webster's Dictionary were not logicians. They had no idea about logic and logical fallacies, because the definition that they give for choice is the act of selecting or making a decision when faced with two or more possibilities. Well, the problem there is selecting and deciding are synonyms for choice. They're synonymous. Choice, selecting, and deciding are all interchangeable, synonymous terms. Okay? Therefore, the quote definition they give is not a definition, it is called a tautology. A tautology is when you use different words to say the same thing. You're not communicating a definition when you give a tautology. Okay, you can't use the word or any of its synonyms in the definition of the word you're trying to define. Otherwise, you're not communicating anything. You're certainly not communicating a definition. But let's stick with autonomy. There's just so much to unpack with Leighton Flowers and all of his fallacies, all of his errors of thought that he brings into all of his anti-Calvinist videos. But these are just a couple of them. So let's look at Leighton Flowers' methodology for trying to figure out definitions of words. He's going to go to Merriam-Webster's.
Even if you just pull up just a basic dictionary meaning of the word autonomous, like here's Webster's, okay? And you got the first one there is about a governing, being self-governing, the right of self-government. So this is more of a political definition of the word autonomous. And then secondly, you've got this self-directing or self-determining freedom. It's especially moral independence, personal autonomy, self-governing state. You also see this with the thesaurus is a good way to find kind of a definition of a term, because
no, it is not. That's not what a thesaurus is for. You find synonyms and antonyms of the word you're trying to look at. That's all the thesaurus is good for. It does not give us definitions. I mean, this should be basic level stuff, right? This man has a PhD, and he can't figure out the difference between a thesaurus and a dictionary. But notice what the thesaurus get, and this is what Leighton Flowers is going to affirm all of these things about himself. That he is self-governing, that he is sovereign, or that humans are sovereign, that humans are, quote, free, that humans are, quote, self-determining. Now, understand something. As much as Leighton Flowers wants to rail against Calvinists, reformed Christians, those who hold to reformed orthodoxy, as saying, oh, you're divine determinists, or a lot of times he'll just say, you guys are determinists. We say, no, we're not determinists. We are not mechanistic determinists. We are not naturalistic, materialistic determinists. We are divine, decisional, decretal determinists. Okay? But as much as he rails against Calvinists for being determinists, he himself is a determinist, just as much as any Calvinist. He is an auto-determinist, self-determinist, a subjective, anthropological, or anthropocentric determinist. Okay? You can't get away from determinism. Leighton Flowers can't get away from determinism. The atheist Sam Harris apparently can't get away from naturalistic, materialistic determinist. And the biblical Christian can't get away from divine, decisional, decretal determinism. Okay? We are divine determinists. But Leighton Flowers is an auto-determinist. He believes in determinism. He believes he himself determines his own course of action at any given time, power of contrary choice, etc. He believes he is sovereign over his own self. He is self-sovereign. So therefore, God is not sovereign over his self. He is sovereign over his own self. It's amazing the things that this man has to affirm as far as falsehoods, errors, and lies when he rails against the truth, as found in Reformed theology.
When you go to Anonymous and you look at
autonomous,
obviously synonyms for it, you see self-ruling or uncontrolled or self-determining, free, self-governing. You've also got
So those are all terms that Leighton Flowers wants to apply to himself. Okay? And again, there's so much I could talk about in this video, but I wanted to stick with just the subject of autonomy. I don't want to digress. I've already digressed, but I don't want to do that too much because I don't want to make this too long. Let's see. Yeah, I have a few minutes left. I want to keep this under a certain amount of time. But I wrote up a little section here. This is in pages. Autonomy means self-law, or to be a law unto oneself. Auto means self, and nomos means law. Human beings, since their creation, have never possessed the attribute of autonomy. They have never been a law unto themselves. For example, Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. Let's just jump over there quick. I was trying to do this earlier, and apparently I can't enlarge this. I would like to enlarge it. Anyway, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day you eat of it you shall surely die. So here we have a law. You shall not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's a command. Okay, anytime a command is given, a law is given, that means that those to whom the law is given or a command is given, they are not autonomous, a law unto themselves. They have had a law imposed upon them by an higher authority, in this case, God. God being the higher authority, God giving the law. Here's the law: you shall not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And he also gives a consequence for disobedience to that law. You will surely die. Okay? The wages of sin is death. And what is sin? Sin is any transgression of the law, any lack of conformity unto the law, or any missing of the mark of perfection that the law demands. Okay? Any missing of the mark of the perfection of you shall not eat, namely, if they do eat, results in death. That results in death. So from his very creation on the sixth day, Adam was given a law by God, a specific law. You shall not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That means Adam was not autonomous, a law unto himself. Okay? He was huponymous, under law, hupa namas, under law. Or in Latin would be something like sub lego, under law. Okay? Subject to the law. Let's go with, I also quoted here in the pages, Revelation chapter 20, just to, Revelation 20. Yeah, my whole point here to give you something from Genesis and then Revelation is to point out that from cosmology to eschatology, man has never been a law unto himself. Okay? Human beings have never been a law unto themselves. So we see that in Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. And then we're going to go all the way to eschatology, Revelation chapter 20, verses 12 and 13, and Revelation 21, verses 8 and 27. Let's just take a look at those. Like I said, I wish I could enlarge it a little bit for you. I apologize. I'll have to figure that out. Revelation chapter 20. Okay, verses 12 and 13. And I saw the dead. This is not, the saints have already been resurrected to glory at this point, and this gets into the how you read the millennium of Revelation chapter 20 and all that, but we'll get into that another time. But I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life, and that is all the saints of Christ are in the book of life. Okay? So the books, plural, there's more books than just the book of life. The books were opened. And the dead were judged, can't judge without a law, can't be judged without some standard, some law by which to be judged. The dead were judged by what was written in the books, plural, according to what they had done. So we could call these books the books of works. Okay? Now this is not the saints. Our judgment for all of our sin has already been poured out on the propitiatory appeasement of the wrath of an angry party, namely God, for our sinfulness, our evil works. But the dead at this point are not, they're not in the book of life. They are judged by their works, by their wicked works, according to what they had done, by the books of judgment. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged. Again, that presupposes law, each one of them according to what they had done. So none of these people are autonomous. They are huponymous, under law, because they will be judged by the law. They will be judged by what they had done, written in the books, which I would submit that the saints are actually going to be examining these books of judgment in during the millennium in their glorified state. We will come away from reading these books of the works of all those who are not there in glory. We will be reading these books and determining, yes, in fact, God's judgments are just and true. Just and true are thy ways, O triune God. Revelation chapter 21, as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. So this indicates that none of these people were autonomous. They might have lived their lives in deceit, thinking they were autonomous, but they're going to find out in the eschatological judgment that they were never, in fact, a law unto themselves or laws unto themselves. They were always huponymous, under law, and they will be judged by the law. Okay? Let's just go back to pages quick. In fact, autonomy is an attribute that belongs to God alone. To God alone. Now, some would say he is above the law. Well, he's above the law that he gives, but he does operate with purpose, with intention. Okay, there's a mind of God that he acts out in time. And so we have said that no, he's not ex lex, above the law or outside the law. But he is not sub lego, under the law, or huponymous, under law. And we're not talking about Christ in the incarnation. He was absolutely huponymous, under law. He was sub lego. He was subject to the law, made subject to the law, and fulfilled it perfectly, obviously. But the eternal triune God is in fact autonomous. He is a law unto himself. That is an attribute that belongs to God alone, none of his creatures. Any creature who attempts to claim that they are autonomous with regard to God and his imposed laws upon all creation are actually claiming an attribute which belongs to him alone, thus making themselves and claiming to be God. That is, they're claiming an attribute for themselves that in fact belongs to God alone. That's idolatry. In other words, it is heretical to claim for oneself an attribute for the creature which belongs to the Creator alone. It is a form of idolatry to do so. Far from being a defense of divine holiness, as Leighton Flowers fallaciously asserts, the claim of human autonomy is an atheistic claim. Worse, it is a satanic occultist claim. It is a satanic occultist claim. It is the claim made by people like Aleister Crowley, okay, who said one of his most famous quotes was, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." In other words, I am a law unto myself. Okay, it's a false claim. So Leighton Flowers is actually claiming for the human creature as Christian truth. This is not Christian truth. This is atheistic falsehoods. This is satanic occultist falsehoods that this man is promulgating as Christian truth, all in defense of his fallacious definition of human libertarian free will, the power of contrary choice, which is not how the Bible defines human libertarian free will. So I hope this is helpful. I know sometimes this is like, drinking water out of a fire hydrant because I'm kind of moving fast through this stuff. But post your comments down below. Let me know what you're thinking about this. We'll talk to you soon. Soli Deo Gloria.